Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Waring of Full Moon Wares. Thank you so much for joining me and crafting along with my Let's Make Spun Cotton Candy Canes tutorial. In this video, you will learn how to create your own charming and nostalgic antique style candy canes using old world spun cotton techniques. Before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about what spun cotton is. If you aren't familiar with spun cotton, it's an old world art form that was traditionally used to make holiday ornaments. The reason people like to make ornaments out of cotton, other than the obvious aesthetic reasons, is that cotton is so lightweight that it won't weigh down the branches of a Christmas tree. It's traditionally made by wrapping raw cotton around a wire or other armature, stiffening it with glue wash, and then painting and decorating it. Now let's get started. I wanted to show you that I did prepare a little kit for this project that is available in my shop. The kit includes everything that I'll be using today during the tutorial, and with the kit you'll be able to make 24 of the antique style spun cotton candy canes that you see here. There's also a little bit of extra to practice with. If you enjoy this project, I do offer many other tutorials and kits in my online shop that cover a variety of techniques. For the candy canes, we'll be starting with the basics and primarily learning the spinning technique, which involves wrapping long strands of cotton around a wire. I consider this technique to be the foundation of spun cotton, and it's a great place to start. And I do want to show you a few of the other pieces that I made with some of my kits and tutorials that I think are good for the holidays. This here is my snowman candy container. It's my winter 2024 class and kit. And the kit allows you to make 2 snowmen. You can look inside and I have some candies and a little gift in the hat even. This is a really fun one, so I've been enjoying making these, and they make great decor or gifts for the holidays for your friends and family. These are some of my spun cotton icicles. That's another really good beginner kit and class. And also the spun cotton mushrooms, which make really pretty ornaments for your tree. I put them on some greenery here so you could see what they look like against that, and I think the color just looks really nice. So you can put those on a package, on a Christmas tree, a garland, a wreath, whatever you like. And those 3 projects that I just showed you are definitely all beginner level projects. So if you like what we do today, they might be a good place to go next. This is step 1, and in this step we'll be preparing the cotton for spinning. So what we have here is the cotton that comes in the little kit that I told you about. This is a white cotton sliver, and sliver is the type of cotton that I like to use for the spinning technique. There's a couple of other different techniques that I use different cottons for, but to spin around a wire I use cotton sliver most often. So sliver is a cleaned cotton that's combed into sort of a long rope-like shape. And what we need to do in order to use it is we're going to first separate it into shorter pieces and then divide those sections into thinner strands. I'm going to set this aside, and I just have a ruler here. To make the candy canes that you see here, you're going to need to tear off the cotton into about 14-inch sections, and each 14-inch length will make 4 candy canes. So to do that, I just use a 12-inch ruler and I just go a little bit over on each end. I have enough cotton here that I don't have to be exactly precise. So there are a few sections. And the next thing that we're going to do is to divide these thicker strands of cotton into narrower strands. The reason why we do that is to make it easier to spin and get a more refined shape. If you tried to spin something this thick onto a pipe cleaner, then it would be really big and bulky. And to get about this width, we're going to divide these strands into 4 narrower strands. And this is pretty easy to do, especially when you're working with a short piece that's only 14 inches long. So I just like to kind of find the middle and then coax it apart. So now we have two halves, and then we'll take these halves and divide them once more and try to get as best as you can pieces that are equal. If one ends up being a little thicker than the others, that's not a problem at all. That always happens. It's pretty much impossible to do it perfectly. And if you look at my candy canes, you can see they're all different widths. And to me, that just adds to the charm and the handmade nature. So we have two there, and I'll divide this piece as well. Just be gentle with it. There we go. And if you do get one that ends up being real thick, you can always pull a little bit more off. If you think it's too thick, you can go down like that and remove a small section of it. If it's thicker in one area than another, then you can take a piece off of there as well. So you can make some adjustments. I do want to say that before you start spinning or working with glue wash, it's always a good idea to prepare all of your cotton ahead of time, because once we get into the glue, your fingers are going to start getting sticky, and then to go back and try to separate and divide the strands of cotton would be a big mess. So I like to try to take care of the cotton ahead of time and prepare all the pieces that I think I'm going to be using. When I'm working on spun cotton, if I have a lot of little strands, what I like to do is to hang them on the back of a chair that's next to me like this, and that keeps them nice and tidy. And when I'm ready for a new piece, I can just reach over and grab one. So that's a good way to keep your cotton while you're working. So this is everything that we need to do in the first step, and our cotton is now ready for spinning. This is step 2, and in this step, we'll be spinning our candy canes. Before we get started with this step, there's a couple things that I need to mention. We will be using glue wash for this, and to make your glue wash, you're going to need to use 1 part of white glue. It's also called school glue or sometimes PVA glue, and 4 parts of warm or hot water. And just put that in a jar with a lid and shake it up. That will mix it up nicely for you. Or pour it into an open jar and stir it with your paintbrushes. To apply the glue wash, I like to use a wide flat tip brush like this number 12 filbert tip brush. These are some of my favorite brushes to work with for glue wash and for painting. And I also have a fan brush, which is a nice brush for glue wash as well. Another thing that you'll want to have ready for this step is a nonstick drying tray to put your glue wash pieces on. So I just have a little enamel tray that's oven safe with a piece of parchment paper. My preferred method for drying my spun cotton pieces is just in my kitchen oven. And for this project, you can do it around 200 degrees, depending on your oven, and they'll just take a minute or two since they are so small. So you want to have that ready. And I also should mention that I like to keep a little damp towel nearby for this part because we will be using the glue wash and that does get sticky. So here are some candy canes that I made. They don't look like candy canes yet, but this is when the cotton is spun onto the wire. So these are 4-inch cotton chenille pipe cleaners. I like to use the real cotton rather than the synthetic. It's just softer and it works better for spinning cotton. So this is what they'll look like after they're spun. You can see they're not completely smooth. When you add the glue wash, that does help smooth them out a bit. So in contrast, we have some here that have had the glue wash and they're dry. So you can see the difference between the two. So I'll put these aside and we'll get started with the spinning. And to make the candy canes here, we're going to use 4-inch pieces of the cotton chenille pipe cleaners. And then I'll take one of the strands that we worked on in the last step. This part is going to take a little bit of practice for most of you. I would say just keep trying and have some patience. Some people pick it up right away and others it takes a little bit longer. But just give it a try and see what you think. So this is the cotton sliver, and I'm going to start down here on the end of the pipe cleaner. I'm right-handed, so I like to hold my cotton in my right hand and my wire in my left hand. And to start it out, the tail of the cotton where you tear it away from the rope is always a little bit thinner. So I'll go around a few times at the beginning. So what I'm doing here is twisting the wire with this hand, my left hand, and I'm pinching the cotton and kind of feeding it onto the wire with my right hand. So I'll pinch it between my pointer finger and my thumb and apply a firm but gentle pressure. You don't want to push so hard that you can't turn it or it starts to hurt your fingers, but it will leave kind of a little dent in your fingers. And this is what I mean about you might need some practice. You'll get the feel of this after a few tries. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm spinning with this hand and I'm holding the cotton on an angle upwards towards the tip. If you hold it straight on to the wire and spin, it will stay where it is. And to get it to travel up the tip, you're going to put it on an angle. And since these are kind of thin, they have 2 passes of the cotton sliver. So we're going to go down to the end and then back. I like to hold it at a more severe angle like this, so the cotton travels down, leaving a thinner layer. If you held it at a less angle and you travel to the end, the layer would get thicker. So I like to do 2 thin layers for this project. And now I'm spinning with this hand while pinching with these 2 fingers and applying a gentle pressure. My cotton is coming up from below, and I'm trying to maintain an even application by keeping the angle the same, spinning the same, and having the same pressure. It never really ends up being perfectly even. Like I said before, when you apply the glue wash, you can kind of work out some of the lumps and bumps a bit and secure some pieces that might be some little flyaways like I have down here. But I just think that that's part of what I like about spun cotton. It is a little bit imperfect. So when we get to the tip here, we're just going to go back and change the angle. We're going to go back the other direction. And don't worry about any fuzzy bits there. We can secure them with glue wash or come back and cut them off later after it's been glue washed and dried. So I'm going to go back the other way. And you should see that this 14-inch piece is just about enough to make one. If your cotton starts getting ridged and looking kind of like a unicorn horn, I guess, you want to make sure that your rope is going on sort of in a flat ribbon rather than a rounded rope. If you apply it flat like this, you'll get a smooth application. If it's rounded, you'll get something that's kind of swirly like a unicorn horn. So if that's happening to you, that's why. So I'm going back the other way. And I'm going to get all the way down to the end. And when I get to the end, what I like to do is pull the cotton and thin it out a little bit so I don't have an abrupt stop of a thick piece of cotton. And then I'll just blend that end in like that. Don't worry about that. Definitely don't tug on that because it will start to unravel your candy cane. So that's one that I spun, and we will put the glue wash on, but I'm going to show you one more. Okay. And once you learn this technique, you can really use this for a lot of different things. Like this would be how I would make the arms and legs on an animal, for example. So here's another pipe cleaner, and I'm just going to do the same thing that I did, starting at this end here and pinching it on with my left hand, going around a few times at the beginning. And now I have my cotton coming up from the bottom. It's going on as a flat, wide ribbon and traveling up the wire at an angle towards the tip. So rotating with this hand, a gentle pressure between these 2 fingers. And I'm doing this one a little bit faster. Just take your time with it. It will take a few tries. Now I'm at the top. You can sort of fold the cotton on the edge down a little bit and then change the angle. I'm going to go back the other way and just do the same thing. And if you get a piece in yours that's thinner, an area that's a little bit thinner than you like, you can go around a few times in that area before moving it down, before moving the sliver down on the wire. I'll show you what I mean. Say right here is a little thin. I'm going to go around maybe like 1.5 times in that spot to do my best to even it out with the rest of it. Okay. And that's just being a bit picky. I think these look really cute when they're kind of all a little bit different. And now the tail, I'm just going to roll that in my fingers like I showed you. I tore it off to help blend it in. And you can kind of smooth your cotton down now with your fingers if you like. You always want to make sure that you're rolling it in the direction that you applied the cotton. If you start going the other way, it's going to unravel, and that's not what we want. So you can do it like this if you want to smooth it out a little bit. It's not really necessary, but when you roll it in your fingers, it does help kind of smooth and sculpt the shape a bit. So now we have two that we've done with the cotton, and I'm going to show you how I like to apply the glue wash. It's really simple. The main thing is that you want to make sure that you're going in the direction that you applied the cotton. Just like I showed you with rolling it in between your fingers, make sure you're kind of going that way. If you start pulling that way, the cotton may come off. So I'm twisting it the same way I did. And for the glue wash, you do want to use kind of a good bit, but not so much that it's dripping down your hand. Once you have a nice even coating of glue wash, you can go back and smooth any bumps or areas that you don't like out in between your fingers like this if you want. Another thing you can do with these once they're wet with the wash is you unroll them, kind of like the clay snake technique, and that will help to make it a little bit more uniform in width. And once you have it glue wash, you just want to check and make sure the ends you pay special attention to, because if it is going to unravel, it'll start at the ends first. So I do put a little bit of extra on the ends, and then this one is ready to dry. You can put that in your oven at 200 or 225 degrees, and it'll just take a minute or two. If you're working in a large batch, maybe you're going to make all 24 at once, I would recommend to do everything in stages. So spin 24 of the candy canes. After you've spun all 24, then go and do the glue wash. And then you'll find that the first ones that you washed will be dry almost by the time you get to the end. But if they're not, you put them all in the oven and then they come out and they're ready to paint. So I like to work like that in kind of stages. And once this is dry, it will be ready to paint and decorate. So that's what I'm going to show you next. This is step 3, and in this step we'll be painting and glittering the candy canes. So here I have some of the finished spun candy canes before they're painted. They've come out of the oven and they're completely dry and they're ready to paint. I want to show you a few different painting options that I've done. This one is the one that I like the best. It's actually the most simple and easiest to do. It's just one kind of broad stripe, and you can see that my stripes aren't entirely perfect. They're a little bit faded in some areas, and I really like the way that that looks. It looks more vintage like that. This is another one that I've done that has a broad stripe as well as a narrow stripe running between the broad stripes. And to me, this one looks a little more realistic. It does look like a piece of candy. So you can decide what you like for your candy canes. And to paint the candy cane stripes, I like to use watercolor paint. So this is a palette that I've been working off of, and I have a mix of red, a little bit of yellow ochre, some orange, and I like to mix my paint for this with coffee, a little bit of coffee, because I think that will give it an antique effect. If you wanted, you could paint your candy canes with a little bit of coffee before you paint the red stripes on to age them even more. So if you wanted to do that at this point, you would paint them with a little bit of brewed coffee or tea and then let them dry and then do the stripe. If you try to do the stripe while they're wet, the stripes will run. So I'm just going to get my paint ready to go. And the brush that I have is a number 4 filbert tip brush. So filbert tips are a wide brush with rounded corners. They're flat and wide with rounded corners. And these are some of my favorite brushes to work with. This is the brush that I use to do the broad stripe and the narrow stripe. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And we'll start with one of the broad stripes and just make sure that your paint is nice and wet and ready to go. You could also use acrylic paint if you have it. If you want a more opaque look, you don't need to water down the paint as much. But I like to start at one end, and I'm still looking for the direction that I spun the cotton on because the paint will just apply a little easier if you're going with the natural texture. So I'm going to start at this end, that's the top, and just use the width of the brush as the width of the stripe and gently start applying the paint while you're turning the candy cane. And you can see what that looks like. So I try to keep an equal distance between the stripes and try to keep the stripes heading down at the same angle. Just a little more paint, and I just turn and take your time with it. Once you do a few of them, you can become quite quick at it. But I just like to make sure that I'm keeping this white the same distance apart or as close as possible. So you can see what that starts to look like. And my paint is kind of fading out now. This is a little bit lighter. It has a little more water in it. But again, that just adds to the antique look. To get that red, I like to mix in a little bit of yellow, ochre, some red, and then the coffee, sometimes some orange. I think that gives the red a really nice antique look rather than just use straight red, which you can also do. That will just give you a little bit different look. You could do any color you want, really. So this one is painted, and that's what it looks like after you've done one broad stripe. You need to set this aside to dry before you put the glitter on. And if you do want to go ahead and do one of the 2 stripe, the one with a wide and narrow stripe, you also want to wait for your wide stripe to dry before you paint the narrow stripe. So I have one here with a broad stripe that's already dried, and I'll show you how I do the narrow stripe with the same brush. So I'm just going to pick up some paint, and I just use the edge of the brush rather than the whole tip. I just turn it on the side and just keep it right in the middle of the stripes as I work my way down. And I'm not doing like one continuous twist and brush stroke. I'm just kind of doing it in little bits. So you can see what that starts to look like. That's pretty too. You could do that in a different color. You could do maybe like a dark red for the wide stripe and then a light pink for that, or even a green, whatever you like. Just going to finish that up. And when you do add the glitter on too, that will add a little more dimension to these. The reason why I like to work with watercolor is because you do get that variation. Every time I pick up paint, it's a little bit different because it's coming from a different area on my palette. So you get a nice variation. You get some fading and some ombre. So now that this is painted, we're going to set it aside and let that dry. And I'll show you how I glitter them. I'm going to use these others over here that are now dry. And to apply the glitter, I'm going to use a straight Elmer's glue right out of the bottle. So I have some of that here. I like to keep my glue in this type of jar. It has a lid and then you can just take it off really easily. We don't need these right now. And then this is about the amount of glitter that I like to put on. You can do as much or as little as you want. You don't even have to do it if you don't want to, but I think that a little bit of glitter for the holidays is nice. And the glitter that I'm using is a blend of mica flake, ground mica, and some ground glass glitter. So these are all authentic antique style glitters. And right here we have some that I've already glittered that I haven't bent yet. So I'm going to move those off to the side. To apply the glue, I kind of do the glue pretty liberally. So I can do up to like 3 at a time. You can do 1 at a time if you like, but I'll usually hold 3 or so in my hand. And I'm not looking for like a perfectly even coating on mine. I want it to look like some of the glitter has worn off over time. So I don't mind holding 3 together and then maybe I'm missing some spots on them, and that doesn't really bother me. So that is enough glue. I can use that lid to rest my brush on. And I just put them in the glitter. You could sprinkle the glitter on top if you want. Since I do so many, I have a tray of glitter, but you could just sprinkle it on and then give them a nice coating. You can see what that looks like. When it dries, you can tap a little bit more off, but I kind of leave them totally coated with glitter, and then once they're dry, I like to tap them off. Look how pretty that is. There's nothing like this mica and glass glitter. It really gives the spun cotton pieces or anything you put it on a really nice vintage or antique look. Okay, so here's some that have already dried, and bending them into the candy cane shape is really simple. I also think they look really pretty as peppermint sticks, and last year I made some long ones and I just put them in a little glass vase coming out on my mantle, and they were just so pretty like that. But if you do want to bend yours into the candy cane shape, it's just really simple. You can do it however you like, but I like mine to have this look. So one thing you might want to check before you bend them is, do you want to cut any of the ends off? If you have a little bit of like fuzzy cotton, or they're a little pointy on the end and maybe you don't like this, I actually like the way that looks, so I don't usually trim them. I think it makes them look more handmade. But you can see this one here, I trimmed it so it's nice and straight on the ends, versus, let me find one that I didn't trim. Here's one that I didn't trim. So you can see the difference. And just do what you like. If you want to trim some off, go ahead. But all I do to bend them, it's really simple because they're pipe cleaners. They bend really easily. And that's it. Just get the shape that you like. Every one is a little bit different, and that's part of the fun. So I just think these are so pretty. They're really pretty on a Christmas tree, a feather tree, on a wreath, a garland. You can give them as gifts themselves because they're so pretty if you just tie a little ribbon and maybe a bell around them. I'm going to show you what I also like to do with them is use them for gift wrapping. This is one of my favorite uses of these. I love gifting, and when you can give something that's handmade and then decorate it with something handmade, I just think it's so pretty. So here's 2 that I've twisted onto one of my snowman candy containers, and I found these really beautiful antique ornament hooks. They're just kind of a little piece of wire that you twist, and you are supposed to twist the ornament right onto the tree. And I just think they look so pretty with the mica glitter on the candy canes. So this is one way that I really like to use them. And I have another little gift that I wrapped here, just really simply in some old book paper. I put a piece of gold cord tucked in a little evergreen sprig and 2 candy canes that make a heart. I just think that's really special little gift to give to someone that you love this holiday season. So I hope that you've enjoyed our time together and that you feel inspired to make some of these antique style spun cotton candy canes for yourself or for your friends and family this holiday season. We've reached the end of our project and our spun cotton candy canes are finished. I hope that you've learned some new techniques and enjoyed our time crafting together. I would love to see your creations, so please share them on social media and don't forget to tag me at Full Moon Wears. Thanks again and happy holidays, Lisa. If you enjoyed this project, be sure to visit my online shop to check out my other available tutorials and kits, which are previewed here. The link is in the video notes.